Hello, and welcome to Policy Matters Now. My name is Daniel Ortiz, and I'm Outreach Director at Policy Matters Ohio. And welcome to today's conversation about dignity and how we can pull together for working families to get a better deal. At Policy Matters Ohio, we push for a more prosperous, equitable, sustainable, and inclusive Ohio for everyone. And we wouldn't be able to do that without support from community members like you. So thank you for joining us today. And you may be joining us on Facebook, YouTube, or Twitter. Whichever platform you're on, please sign up for our newsletter, like, follow, and subscribe to get additional updates. And do please ask questions throughout today's live stream. We may respond directly with a written comment or later in the Q&A, and we hope to have time at the end to allow our panelists to respond to questions. But jumping right in, you know, when we focus on how to help working people, no matter our differences, we all do better. And that's what we're here to talk about today. But for years now, far too many Ohioans who work hard are being left behind. And recently, we've seen some steps in the right direction, but we still have a long way to go. Through the COVID crisis, companies like Amazon and Walmart are seeing huge profits through the roof, but workers at these companies and many others are struggling with necessities like a living wage, adequate protections at work, paid family and medical leave, quality, affordable childcare, or support in between jobs while they're unemployed. The rich continue to refuse to pay people the true value of their work, and they get certain politicians to shortchange us. But together we can change that. Now imagine what that'd look like. What if the rich contributed as much as they took? What if everyone had time off to care for the children and elder family members in their lives, and the right to schedule time off? You know, there are signs of hope, though. And I think we're seeing policy wins that center the dignity and the well being of all people. Well, federal legislation like the American Rescue Plan is focused on helping people recover, and the Bipartisan Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, bringing resources to our communities, that is crucial. But now, our state and local governments have a role to play in bringing these uh, policies home. How we rebuild our communities, how we restore damage done by the COVID crisis and repay essential workers is being decided in the cities that we all live in. And we want you to engage, your local leaders to ensure that they prioritize a dignified recovery for all of us. Now, today is Cyber Monday. And on Cyber Monday, like many folks out there, I'm gonna be real. I struggle with the impulses of consumerism. And recently I've been reading too many articles about, the economy and talking about the economy like it's beyond us, something intangible. But that is not true. The wealth and resources a country and our region have is about people. And the choices on how to guide the economy is something we can control. A lot of these bad ideas and talking points get recycled because we don't speak up, but you can change that. And remember, the economy is about how we value each other. And those are decisions that we collectively make. It always has been. Now, I'm gonna geek out, and since I have calendar reminders popping up on my computer, just share that I have reminders that occasionally encourage me to dream and to think about what's possible. Be honest, my Monday reminder is to imagine an economy that workers want to see and to be a part of, and that's something I have to really think about because what we have right now does not work. This isn't it. So that said, I am still so grateful to see the unions of working people who are taking on the fight for dignity through campaigns to unionize their workplaces, by reporting abuses and standing up for their rights all across the country. And, this fight to push for a more just economy will take all of us to get there. And there are many ways that we can be in solidarity with working people and to advocate for change, which is why I'm so excited for today's conversation. So let's hear from our guests. I'm going to do a quick round of introductions, but I'm joined by my colleague, Mike Shields, who's a researcher at Policy Matters Ohio. Also joined by Tammy Lunan, the Caring Economy Organizing Director at the Ohio Organizing Collaborative, and Grace Heffernan, who's a member with the Northeast Ohio Workers Center. So for all three of y'all, we're going to give you a first intro question. So today's conversation, is about how we, the people, are the economy, but there's a persistent media narrative that minimizes how people are doing and focuses on how certain jobs aren't filled or tries to spin the conversation to fears about inflation or why the latest item you may have ordered has yet to be delivered to your doorstep. But, what would you say to people trying to make sense of all this? And we'll start off by going to you, Mike.
Thanks, Daniel. Hi, everybody. People are the economy. If there's one thing that I hope we take away from the pandemic, it's just how much we all rely on the people who kept things going so that so many of us could get through the crisis safely. These are the folks who stocked the grocery shelves, who cared for us if we got sick, and who kept our kids safe so that we could all get back to work. They did this at great risk to themselves. And in fact, you drive down the street, or you did last year anyway, and people would be honoring them with yard signs, celebrating the frontline heroes. But the fact is, working people need more than acknowledgement from their neighbors. They need and deserve respect from their employers. That means a safe place to work. It means a wage that covers the cost of living and that they're paid for all of the hours that they work. It means a fair schedule with enough notice to get childcare. And policymakers really have to step up to make these things happen. And part of that, which I'm going to dive into later, means making sure that when people are out of work, they have a robust unemployment compensation system to fall back on while they navigate their search to find new work. But we see year after year, working people are more productive than ever before. They make the state wealthier than ever before. But it's been decades since that translated into commensurately better pay for working people themselves. So this really comes down to bargaining power. To have a fair economy that works for everybody, not just for the wealthy few, we have to do the work to strengthen working people's voice on the job. Back to you, Daniel.
All right, thank you, Mike. Tammy, same question to you.
Greetings, everyone. The one thing that I would definitely would want to lift up as we think about, working people um, on Cyber Monday. One of the things I really like to lift up is really thinking about how folks um, want to have like equitable experiences at the workplace, right? And so, yes, we're in a unprecedented times due to coming out of the pandemic. Um, Workers have never been more scared. Um, why should people risk their lives to make $10 an hour, right? And so we have to make sure that the workplace is equitable, that we have equitable salaries, we have equitable policies that help workers. When we think about like part-time workers and how they're not able to accrue paid time off of work, and how those folks don't have the opportunity to stay home and take care of their loved ones. Should they come up sick? These are all questions and things that we need to answer as we move forward, um, as we start to like grapple with the realities that we're seeing coming out of the pandemic. How do we make how do we make work more equitable for everyone, and not just work for the top 1%, right? um, all workers deserve to have living wages. They deserve to have secured benefits, paid time off. These are all issues that we definitely want to see addressed through policies and whatnot. So, I think like really thinking about that, really thinking about the experience that the worker is having, and how we're seeing all of these businesses um, struggling to kind of stay afloat coming out of the pandemic. And a lot of it has to do with the fact that the system was not set up in an equitable way to start off with, right? And so we have to reframe it, we have to rename it, and do the work to actually make the system more equitable for everyone.
I love that, Tammy. Thank you. We got to reframe it and rename it so we can make work work. All right, Grace, bring us home. Your response.
Hey, yeah, I loved that. I've already got a couple of sound bites that I might want to borrow from Tammy and Mike in future discussions. So Grace Heffernan here with the Northeast Ohio Worker Center. The Northeast Ohio Worker Center and worker centers more broadly aim to be a union for people without unions, right? We are a place where workers who are not organized can go to get relief. And so I've been really moved by just a couple of the comments that have already been shared this morning, and I think I'll touch on two of them. And so I think Tammy, you talked about like systems, right? And so when we think about work and we think about workers, there's multiple levels, and one level is the system level. The way in which employment currently works fundamentally does not work for workers. I think Mike mentioned this, that workers in Ohio are more productive today than they have ever been, but yet their wages have stagnated. And so when we think about on the systemic level, the work that needs to be done, there's a lot of it, right? I mean, there's campaigns to run, there's organizing to do, there's policymakers to keep accountable. And frankly, it's our duty to ensure that the comfortable are made uncomfortable. And I think that's where we have this sort of like second personal layer. And I think you can't do one without the other. And so the other thing that I want to touch on is something you said, Daniel, about reminders to yourself, personal reminders. And that just reminds me about the way in which we all have an opportunity to set intentions. And we can do that in all sorts of ways. But in particular, we can have an intention to be in solidarity with the working class, with working people. And we can do that in ways big and small. And so I think often when folks have an opportunity to really show their support for workers, such as during the pandemic, it felt like it was a very clear way in which folks could support essential workers. Like I can go out and I can get a yard sign to say, thanks, heroes. I can donate lunches to nursing staff. I can go on my Facebook and I can provide, um, you know, boosts to social media campaigns supporting essential workers. And I think that we all have to hold that intention as we move away from those really big moments into the everyday moments in which we can be in solidarity with working folks. And so I love that this session today is happening during Cyber Monday, because there are many ways in which we can ensure that we are taking the side of working people on days like today and every day. So those are kind of my thoughts, right? That there is big systems level work that has to happen, but that each of us can make choices every day that are going to impact positively, hopefully, what's going on with working people.
Awesome. Thank you, Grace. And, so much there, but I really appreciate you, just again, lifting up, the steps that we can take for solidarity. Um, so actually following right up on that, Mike, I'd love to maybe hear more from you. And just want to share, you recently co-authored a report on unemployment compensation with recommendations on how, state and federal government could reform the system. Could you share some of the findings and why unemployment compensation is so vital to ensuring the dignity of our neighbors who are between jobs?
Absolutely. First, Ohio makes it harder than all but three other states to qualify for unemployment compensation based on pay. Zach Schiller and I learned that there are around 750,000 working Ohioans, about 15%, who, if they were to lose their job, would not be covered by our unemployment system, mostly due to low pay. And our system is also fundamentally unfair. So the typical woman working in Ohio would have to work 2.5 hours more per week than her male counterpart to qualify for unemployment benefits. The median Black worker would have to work 4 hours more than the median white worker to qualify. Ohioans paid the lowest, the 10th percentile, would have to work 4 times as much as those paid near the top at the 90th percentile. That's nearly 27 hours a week versus less than 6. And an Ohioan paid the minimum wage could work 31 hours a week and never, ever qualify for unemployment benefits if they were to lose their job. Now, let's talk about what that means when you get back to work. We started this conversation talking about bargaining power. And our unemployment system is part of the structure of our labor market. What this does is to create a group of workers who have very few options when they are out of work. So most workers, if they lose their job, qualify for up to 26 weeks of benefits during normal times. And that's time that they can spend seeking a job that's a good match for their skill set and one that pays well enough to support their family. Potentially, they can spend the time even to get some more training to find that job. And these are the kinds of jobs we want people to have. And to have a vibrant economy, we want people really utilizing their skills in the fullest way that they can. But for low-paid Ohioans, the situation is different. If they lose their job, there is no safety net. Instead of looking for the right job, they're left scrambling to take any job. Or they could lose their home, they could lose the car that they use to get to work. Their children may have to leave the schools that they're in. This is a tremendous disruption to life, and it can be incredibly scary. So that puts working people in a real bind when they're seeking work, and it really hurts their bargaining power um, when they take their next job. So there has been a bill introduced that would address this. It was introduced in Congress by Ohio's Senator Sherrod Brown, as well as a couple of other senators, Wyden and Bennett. That would bring 590,000 of the Ohioans who are currently excluded, mostly based on low pay, into the system, so that everybody who's paid at least $1,500 in the year and $1,000 in one quarter would be covered. This has been introduced both as a standalone bill. It's also part of the reconciliation bill. Now, it was not included in the version that the House just passed, but it's a Senate amendment that we could see added in. But it's also important to recognize Ohio's own legislature would not have to wait for Congress to pass this. It's a great policy that would include a whole lot of folks. Our legislature could and should pass something modeled on this.
That's great. Thank you for sharing those details. And for folks who are following along in the chat, there's a link to Mike's report. Just as a follow-up, I think that you outlined some of the possibilities of good legislation on the horizon, but are there threats also, for unemployment compensation and, facing unemployed workers in Ohio?
Unfortunately, there are. We talked about how so many Ohioans are excluded from state benefits. One of the major success stories from the pandemic is that federal policymakers recognized how vital it is to cover everybody. And so up until September, these Ohioans were covered by expanded federal benefits, along with a lot of other folks who are typically excluded because of things like they may be gig workers, some other self-employed folks, and others were temporarily covered by federal benefits. Now, that was really important. It likely averted a much deeper and more prolonged recession, even than the one that we experienced. We saw a recession that was deeper than any we have seen back to the Great Depression, but it rebounded pretty quickly. Workers are still, of course, and a lot of folks are still without work, but we had federal benefits that supported unemployed folks for a long time, and certainly helped us to avoid a greater crisis. That's under threat right now in Ohio. There's a bill that's been introduced, Senate Bill 228, would take away the governor's power to ever accept voluntary federal money to bolster our unemployment system. That would have to be accepted through an act of our state legislature. So that is something that would certainly make it much more difficult to navigate a crisis like this and to recover quickly from it in the future.
Thank you for outlining those challenges, Mike. I think, the reality is stark, but again, all of the folks who are watching this, all of us, we have a voice, and we can share that voice, and share our concerns with elected leaders on what they can do. Because again, this is something that's happening at the state level here in Ohio. But speaking of, the power of our voice and the power of people coming together, I'd love to hear from Tammy. Now, Tammy, in your work with Ohio Organizing Collaborative, y'all do so much amazing organizing. And I think, one of the things I've been really just such a fan of is some of the work that y'all have been doing with the group Unemployed Action Ohio. If you could share what, y'all have done to engage unemployed Ohioans, and any thoughts on what y'all will do going forward, that'd be great.
Sure. We really wanted to create a space for unemployed Ohioans to talk about the things that they were experiencing. So, you know, really creating an intentional space for folks to lift up issues that they're experiencing, to be a part of the change they'd like to see, um, and really just empowering them to get active around some of these issues. Now, as we think about unemployment, like that's a sensitive issue for a lot of folks. When people are, having a hard time like providing for their family. And so like we really want to keep the space, safe for them to express those things. A lot of the work that we've been able to do with them is, one kind of build up um, their voice to be able to challenge legislation, and give testimony about the things that they're experiencing, to hopefully, lead to some of the reforms that we need to see in the unemployment sector. We've had leaders be a part of panels. We've had some of our leaders be a part of lawsuits to challenge unfair. Um, practices in unemployment, most notably um, when Governor DeWine ended the $300 extra unemployment support that folks were receiving. Um, so we're definitely like finding ways to get leaders involved. Um, and if folks want to get involved with Unemployed Action Ohio, you can absolutely look for us on Facebook. We have a Facebook group. Um, and like I said, we try to keep that space a safe space for folks to talk about the issues that they're navigating, both with the unemployment system and, like things that they're experiencing in life in general. And unfortunately, we try to keep that space just for folks that are experiencing unemployment or advocates of unemployment.
Mm. Thank you for that, Tammy. And I think it's such a vital space. As someone who's, myself experienced, long-term unemployment, it's real. And I think um, what you got identified in terms of, having sensitivity to that, and also knowing that there's also a lot of ways to engage and to, again, to reclaim and find power in organizing while going through that is fantastic. Um, Now, to pivot briefly, a lot of your work has also been engaging workers in the care economy. And, there are also lots of challenges facing, childcare workers, home health aides. What could be done to improve those jobs, and how can those workers get involved in organizing?
Yeah, thank you so much for lifting up the care workers. They're our workforce behind the workforce that has really been supporting people to get back into work, right? Get back to work. Coming out of the pandemic, they're one of the only um, industries that did not have a long shutdown. Um, they had a brief shutdown, and then, childcare was back up, right? And what we've realized is how important our care workers are. Um, Here in Ohio, care workers average about $10, 10 between 10 and $11 an hour, right? And so these are things that we absolutely want to be able to start to lift up is better and more equitable wages for care workers. And um, when you think about care workers, you know, the majority of the people that work in that industry are women of color, right? And so we want to make sure that this industry is more equitable, and that we see that folks have um, living wages as well as some more benefits, right? Leave options, paid leave, sick leave options. So those are some of the things that we are absolutely fighting to lift up. A part of that is through Build Back Better. um, you know we're thrilled that the House has passed the Build Back Better Act. um, And we hope that, obviously that it will pass the Senate as well. And, that's $400 billion that would be earmarked for childcare. Um, that could absolutely, lead to some of the things that, we've been talking about, right? Um, Obviously, it will lead to um, more seats in childcare, more children being able to access childcare, but that also, ties into like better wages for workers, and so we're really excited about Build Back Better. That's one of the things that we've really been pushing. In addition to that, the child tax credit is a big part of that. Which is a huge win on both sides of the aisle, right? Because that's something that unemployed workers can also take a benefit of, as a child tax credit, and it doesn't count. It does not count against, their income, so they're able to take um, child tax payments as well, and so it's something that we absolutely, want to see passed. The deadline for the child tax credit is coming up as well. So we definitely want to keep that in mind as December 15th rolls around.
Fantastic. Thank you for all that great information. And I think it's important, like you're saying, to shout out where there have been some successes. And I do think that the child tax credit really does provide a lot for, all of Ohio's working families. So thank you for lifting that up. Next up, Grace, I would love to hear from you. I think one of the points we've heard, and I think you can speak to, is, that workers have long known the unemployment system is, unfair and at times inhumane. And the pandemic shined a light on that more broadly, uh, especially for a part of the population that doesn't typically interact with public benefit systems. Can you talk about how the unemployment system perpetuates inequalities in our state?
Sure. This goes back to my comment I kicked off with, which is that like part of this work in terms of improving conditions for working people is to make the comfortable uncomfortable. And that is really what the pandemic did in terms of um, increasing the number of Americans, not just Ohioans, but Americans who had to interact with our unemployment system. So, anyone who's ever been on unemployment before, whether that is something that's happened to them more than once or just once, knows that it's a really, really difficult system to navigate. Anyone who's been on benefits, period, whether it be SNAP, or received services through our one-stop system, the federally funded workforce system, whatever it may be, there is bureaucracy and red tape for all of those systems. You essentially have to prove how poor you are to be able to access any sort of benefits. And the indignities keep going from there. And so, I think for a lot of Americans, well, if that's happening to other people, that's one thing. But when it started happening to folks who had thought that they had a lot of security in our economy, I think it was a real opportunity to shine a light on systems that really aren't working. And so that's really the opportunity that the pandemic opened up with the unemployment system. And so Tammy talked about the fact that not all workers are created equal. And as is the case with so many systems, our unemployment system was for a long time using using race neutral language and still does for the most part to provide benefits. And so what we know about race neutral language is that it perpetuates inequalities that are baked into our systems from not really that long ago, but they do nothing to counteract those narratives and those outcomes, but they do perpetuate them. And so, one question that continually comes up is how is the unemployment system treating or not treating workers of color equitably? And that's a really tough question to answer because we don't have good data. So right now, the state collects data about the demographics of folks who apply for public benefits, but we don't have data on the back end about who receives those benefits, who retains those benefits. And so generally, it's like this black hole that we don't know anything about. And so how can you make those systems better if you don't even know how they're performing from the beginning? But we have a hunch that they're working inequitably, and there's all sorts of things you could point to. Mike did a really good job, I think. But we know that our unemployment system is really unfair for undocumented workers as well. They're often left out, they're ineligible. These are folks who, as we're coming off the Thanksgiving holiday, are a huge part of our agricultural system, our domestic work systems, and are vitally important to celebrating the holiday season, for just one example. And so there are some significant issues with our unemployment system that until we have better data, we can't even begin to hold our policymakers accountable for.
Well said. Thank you for that, Grace. To kind of pivot, I want to lift up some of the work that you've also been leading with the Northeast Ohio Worker Center. Recently, the Worker Center has joined with other groups for a campaign on Guardians for Fair Work that is seeking a local ordinance on fair scheduling and wage theft enforcement here in the city of Cleveland. Could you share more about that campaign and how people can get involved?
Oh, Daniel, I am so excited that you asked about the Guardians for Fair Work campaign. So for anyone that is tuning in while I am giving this overview, we're going to drop a link for you. So please feel free to visit our website. We'd love to have you endorse. So we were talking about misconceptions related to the economy and workers. So here is a huge misconception. You all have probably been seeing, there's been these memes going around and different news stories about the amount of shoplifting that goes on during the holidays, and that it's this huge issue. And, I don't want to underplay it. I'm sure it is an issue. But if you were to add up all of the robbery, larceny, property theft, and grand theft auto that happens in a year in Ohio, it would be dwarfed, absolutely dwarfed by the amount of wage theft that workers experience each year. And so just let that sink in, right? And I think Mike was actually a huge part of my thinking in this. If you think about the number of police officers that we have, right or wrong, but that we currently have right now to enforce property theft and grand theft auto and larceny and robberies, it's a huge number. The number of investigators that we have right now in the state of Ohio for wage theft is 5. There are 5 people who are responsible for all of that wage theft. And so what that tells you is that our systems, our state is not actually interested in theft, and that it is a matter of who is being stolen from for it to raise to any level of importance. And so knowing all of that, a group of residents and worker organizations have come together to really drive a campaign in the city of Cleveland to try to leverage a really unique moment that we're having in our community. We are home to 3 sports teams, major league sports teams, and our baseball stadium is up for a renovation. It is a almost $500 million investment that our leaders will be making on behalf of our community. And that investment's being mostly done in the name of jobs. And there actually are some really great jobs at our baseball stadium, some union jobs. We love the folks that are working there. We support them wholeheartedly. And what we would love to see is for workers across the city to have that type of quality job as well. And so we know that not all workers in our city are going to be able to have an organized or unionized workplace. And so it's up to us to start thinking about policies that we can pass to make work better in the city of Cleveland. And so the two areas where the Guardians of Fair Work are focusing are on wage theft enforcement and fair scheduling policies. So wage theft, which I just described to you, that that is already illegal. You are not allowed to steal people's wages. But what is lacking in what I illustrated is any sort of enforcement mechanism. And so, what we would love to see is a well resourced enforcement mechanism that holds business accountable, holds employers accountable, but that's also informed by workers. So, we would love to see workers really be at the heart of that. The second aspect of this campaign is around fair scheduling. And so, I don't know if many people like when they think about like what are their passions or does fair scheduling float to the top? I think a lot of times people think about like affordable and accessible childcare. They think about public transit. They think about economic mobility or maybe access to quality education. But I can tell you right now that if you care about those things, if you want workers to have access to those things, they must have a consistent schedule. They must have enough time to get their life in order so that they can get their kids to childcare, so that they can get on the right bus to get to work, so that they can access that educational opportunity that's going to open up more doors for them, so that they can get that second job. Because, folks, I hate to tell you this, we do not pay a living wage in this city. We do not pay a living wage in this state or in this country. And so if you are under the impression that people are working a single job, that's imaginary. Folks need a consistent schedule, particularly minimum wage hourly folks, so that they can access additional employment opportunities so that they can make a living. And so when we think about the narratives and the things that are keeping people in cycles of poverty, there's some simple things we could be doing to improve the quality of work. And so that's what we're proposing through the Guardians of Fair Work. And we would love to have you endorse. Clearly, I'm excited about it. I am certain that there are those of you who are listening who are excited. So please think about endorsing if you haven't already.
Excellent, Grace. Thank you so much. You got me fired up. And yes, please do endorse the Guardians of Fair Work campaign. There's a link there, as well as some other great links to additional resources to understanding more about the challenges of wage theft. Yeah, wage theft, annually is a $15 billion problem nationwide. So this is something that for all the conversations that you're going to be having this holiday season, keep that nugget in the back of your head and make sure that that you can tell this to folks, because I think we can really all do more to advance this conversation on how we get a more just economy. It's going to take all of us to get there. So not seeing any questions in the chat, but y'all still have time. But I'm going to go ahead and throw out a question to our panelists. Again, today is Cyber Monday, but as an alternative to just shopping online for deals, what could our viewers do to show solidarity with their neighbors and support the dignity of all people, today and tomorrow, not just during the holidays, but all year round. So kicking it off, I'll go to you, to Mike first.
Get involved. Join your local worker center. We have 3 of them in Ohio. Join one of the campaigns that Grace and Tammy talked about today. Join or form a union.
I love the short and sweet response, Mike. Next up, Tammy, what would you tell folks?
Yeah, I would absolutely tell people to get involved. We have to use this moment to support our essential workers. And like when the country shut down, we saw what industries stayed open, right? And so we have to support folks. So I definitely want to say get involved. There are various campaigns and organizations, but something simple that like everyone can do is like, share the stream, right? So that other people can have access to this information and they can also get involved. So definitely want to lift that up.
I love it. And I love the self promo. Please share this stream, share this link on all your socials. We are again live, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube. Um, Also, yeah, subscribe and follow us on YouTube. We need to grow some support and love on YouTube. Let's see. Grace, same question to you.
Um, I love the pitch for YouTube. You know what? Always trying to get subscribers to YouTube. Okay, let me see. So I don't actually have like beef with the idea of Cyber Monday in general, right? Like I do enjoy getting deals. I like doing my holiday shopping occasionally from the comfort of my own home. But again, like there are choices. There are so many amazing businesses and creators and artists who are being paid a decent wage for their work, who are selling their work and their goods at a wage that makes sense for them or at a price that makes sense for them. And so like this is what I mean about like having choices. Like so we can still if like online shopping is your bag, you should think about like how you want to do that in a better and more equitable way. Like I sometimes think we get caught up in this idea that like we have to be perfect, that if we are not perfect in all of the aspects of our life and if we are not keeping up with every progressive um, choice that we have, that in some way we have failed. And like that can become so overwhelming. That can just make it feel like, well, I'm not good enough then. I don't want to put myself out there because I know I can't do all of the things that I need to do. And so I guess I would encourage folks like, this I think part of having this panel on Cyber Monday wasn't necessarily to say that like Cyber Monday is bad, right? But it's like we can use Cyber Monday as an opportunity to do good, whether it's by leveraging the popularity of Cyber Monday to do a live stream about about the dignity of work, or if it's about shopping a little bit differently this year. I think there's just all of these ways that we can make choices to be in solidarity with workers and build the future that we want. And yeah, I am such a big proponent of like just get started. It doesn't have to be a big thing. You don't have to jump in the deep end of the pool in order to show support and solidarity for workers. Like when you think about like the height of unions in our community, I mean, think about your grandparents, right? Like I'm certain that they lived complex lives, but that they had really strong values, particularly if you came from a union household, about the ways in which you supported and lifted up workers. And so like we're allowed to have complex lives too and have challenges and things that keep us from living the exact perfect way that we want to live, but like we can still get started. So I turned that into a little bit of a TED talk, but like I don't want people to be intimidated. Like come get involved. Like the Worker Center is here for you. Tammy has a great campaign that she's running. I mean, like there are ways to get involved and you do not have to know the ropes already. Like there are folks who want to help you along the way. So I'm going to mute myself now.
No, I love that, and I think that's the right note to go out on. I think yeah, it's not about perfection; it's about progress. And I think that there are lots of things that you all have heard that you can do, and there are many ways to get involved. So it's going to take a lot to build the world that we want to see. Building power with working families is definitely a start. Civic engagement all year round across all of our communities, and exercising a little bit of radical imagination would be a good start on that. But you know, again, let's see. Before we close, I just want to thank all of our panelists. Y'all are amazing, doing great work. So please, folks, for viewing this, connect with us, and remember to visit the Guardians for Fair Work website, the Unemployed Action Ohio Facebook group, and continue to show up and join your local worker center and meetings and conversations happening, and stay involved. But also be sure to sign up for our e-news, like, follow, and subscribe to our accounts for notifications on how to get involved in Ohio's policy conversation. And again, thank you all so much for watching Policy Matters Now. And remember, your voice matters. Take care.